The waitress saw something wrong and screamed a warning that saved the Mafia boss's life. She thought he'd walk away grateful. Instead, he looked at her like she'd just become his most valuable possession. Now she's in his world, under his watch, and he's made one thing clear. She's not leaving. The neon sign of Rossi's diner flickered against the wet Chicago pavement, casting red shadows across the empty parking lot. It was 2:47 a.m., and the city had that dangerous kind of quiet, the kind that made smart people lock their doors. Matteo Vitali buttoned his charcoal suit jacket and stepped out into the November cold. Behind him, the diner's warmth faded as the door swung shut. His two guards, Frankie and Tommy, flanked him immediately, their eyes scanning the darkness like hunting dogs. "Boss, car's ready," Frankie said, nodding toward the sleek black Mercedes idling 30 feet away. Matteo barely acknowledged him. His mind was elsewhere, on the meeting he'd just left, on the deals that would reshape the South Side territory, on the enemies who'd kill to stop him. At 34, he'd built an empire from his father's crumbling legacy. Blood, strategy, and an iron will had made him untouchable. Or so he thought. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the asphalt as he approached the Mercedes. The driver, one of his most trusted men, Marco, sat rigid behind the wheel, engine purring. Everything looked normal. Everything felt wrong. Matteo's hand reached for the door handle. "Don't get in the car." The scream shattered the silence like gunfire. Matteo's hand froze. His guards drew weapons instantly, whirling toward the source. From the diner's side entrance, a young woman burst into the parking lot, her waitress apron still tied around her waist, her dark hair wild around her face. Please don't open that door," she gasped, running toward them with terrified desperation. "Stay back." Tommy aimed his pistol at her chest. But Matteo raised his hand, stopping him. Something in the woman's eyes, pure, unfiltered terror, made him pause. In his world, fear was currency. He knew real from fake. This was real. "Frankie," Matteo said quietly, his voice like gravel. "Open the door." "Boss." "Open it." Frankie approached the Mercedes cautiously, gun raised. He yanked open the back door. Two men exploded from inside the car, not Marco's backup, but assassins who'd been crammed into the footwell and behind the seats. One lunged at Frankie with a knife. The other raised a shotgun toward Matteo. The parking lot erupted in chaos. Matteo moved with the fluid precision of a man who'd survived 3 decades in a world where hesitation meant death. His hand swept inside his jacket, drawing his Beretta in one smooth motion. He fired twice, center mass, the way his father taught him. The shotgun-wielding assassin crumpled before he could pull the trigger. Frankie grappled with the knife wielder, both men crashing against the car. Tommy rushed forward, but a third attacker, one they hadn't seen, emerged from the driver's seat, firing wildly. Marco's body slumped in the front, blood on the window. He'd been dead before they even walked outside. The waitress screamed and dropped to the ground, hands over her head. Matteo's second shot took the driver assassin in the throat. The man gurgled and fell. Frankie finally overpowered his attacker, snapping the man's wrist and slamming his head against the car door until he went limp. Then silence. Just their ragged breathing and the hiss of the Mercedes's punctured tire. 3 bodies. 3 seconds. Matteo's world. He didn't lower his gun. His eyes swept the parking lot, the rooftops, the surrounding shadows. "Clear the perimeter."
"Now."
Tommy and Frankie scattered, weapons drawn, checking every corner. Matteo approached the trembling waitress still huddled on the ground. He stood over her, gun at his side, and for the first time really looked at her. She was young, maybe 24, 25. Pretty in that girl-next-door way that didn't belong in his world. Her name tag read Clara in faded letters. Her hands shook violently as she slowly looked up at him, her brown eyes wide with shock. "Get up," Matteo said, his voice cold despite the adrenaline still pumping through his veins. Clara struggled to her feet, nearly falling. She pressed against the diner's brick wall, looking at the bodies, at the blood spreading across the pavement, at the man who just killed 3 people like it was nothing. Mateo holstered his gun and stepped closer. Too close. Intimidation was reflex. How did you know? His words were quiet, dangerous. Clara's voice broke.
How did you?
No. Each word landed like a hammer. Tears streamed down her face, but she forced the words out. I've seen them before. Those men. 2 years ago, they came to my family's restaurant in Indianapolis. They took my brother, Antonio. They took him and we never. She choked on a sob. I recognized the one with the knife. Same scar on his neck. I could never forget. Mateo studied her face, searching for lies. He'd interrogated hundreds of people. He could spot deception in a heartbeat, a breath, a blink. This girl was telling the truth. But that created a bigger problem. Frankie returned, slightly out of breath. Perimeter's clear, boss. But we gotta move. Cops will be here in 5 minutes, maybe less. Mateo didn't take his eyes off Clara. Your brother. These men took him. She nodded desperately. They wanted money from my family. We paid everything we had, but Antonio never came home. The police said he probably ran away, but I knew. I knew they killed him. Her voice cracked with 2 years of buried grief. Tommy appeared on Mateo's other side. Boss, she could be part of this. Could be the bait. I'm not. I swear to God, I'm not. Clara's legs nearly gave out. When I saw them getting out of that car through the kitchen window, I knew something was wrong. I knew. She saved your life, boss, Frankie said carefully. But Tommy's right. Could be a setup. Make us trust her. Use her later. Mateo's jaw tightened. In his world, coincidences didn't exist. But neither did waitresses who risked their lives screaming warnings at mafia bosses. Sirens wailed in the distance. He made his decision. Bring her. What? Clara's eyes went wide. No. I need to go home. I need to. Mateo grabbed her arm. Not rough, but firm enough to make his point. You just witnessed a hit on me. You know their faces. You're coming with me, or you're dead by morning. Your choice. That's not a choice. It's the only one you've got. The sirens grew louder. Frankie pulled up a second car, a nondescript Honda they kept for emergencies. Mateo pushed Clara toward it. Please, she whispered, one last desperate attempt. I just wanted to save your life. Mateo paused at the car door, studying her tear-streaked face one final time. Something flickered in his chest, something he'd buried years ago under scar tissue and cold calculation. That's exactly why you're coming with me, he said. Then he shoved her into the back seat and climbed in after her, leaving the bodies, the blood, and the only normal life Clara had ever known behind in that parking lot. The Honda's tires squealed as they disappeared into Chicago's dark heart, and Clara realized with growing horror that she'd just traded one nightmare for another. The Honda tore through Chicago's empty streets, running red lights and weaving through industrial zones where no one asked questions. Clara sat pressed against the door, as far from Mateo as the back seat allowed. Her whole body shook, from cold, from fear, from the image of 3 men dying burned into her mind. Frankie drove with one hand, gun resting on his lap with the other. Tommy twisted in the passenger seat, watching Clara like she might explode. Who do you work for? Tommy's voice was sharp, accusatory. I what? Nobody. I work at the diner. Bullshit. That was too convenient. You just happened to see them? Just happened to recognize them? I told you they took my brother. Yeah, real sob story. Tommy's eyes were cold. How much did the Calabrese family pay you? Or was it the Russians? I don't know what you're talking about. Clara's voice rose in panic. Enough, Mateo's single word silenced the car. He sat perfectly still, his blood-spattered suit looking black in the darkness. His face was unreadable, neither angry nor kind, just calculating. We'll get answers at the estate. Clara's stomach dropped. Estate? No, please just let me go home. I won't tell anyone what I saw. I promise. Your promises mean nothing. Mateo finally looked at her, and she saw something in his dark eyes that terrified her more than the guns or the bodies. Emptiness. You're a liability now. The men who set that trap will know it failed.
They'll know someone warned me.
And they'll come looking. Then give me a bus ticket. I'll leave Chicago tonight. And lead them straight to your family? Mateo's voice was almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. You think they won't already be watching your apartment? Your mother's house in Indianapolis? Clara's blood went cold. My mother, you know we're my mother. I know everything now. Made 2 phone calls before we left that parking lot. He held up his phone. Clara Marie Brennan, 26 years old. Moved to Chicago 8 months ago after your family's restaurant went bankrupt. Your mother, Susan, still lives on Maple Street. Your younger sister, Emma, is a sophomore at Indiana State. Tears streamed down Clara's face. Please don't hurt them. They have nothing to do with this. I don't hurt civilians, Mateo said flatly. But my enemies do. So until I know who you really are and what you really know, you're staying where I can see you. The car pulled through a gate that rose from nowhere, hidden among trees and darkness. They drove up a winding private road for 2 full minutes before a massive house appeared. No, not a house. A mansion. 3 stories of stone and glass that screamed money and power. Armed men emerged from the shadows as the Honda stopped. Clara recognized the same cold efficiency in their movements that Mateo had shown in the parking lot. These weren't ordinary security guards. Mateo stepped out and straightened his jacket, ignoring the blood like it was rain. Bring her inside. Guest room on the 3rd floor. Lock it. Boss, you sure about this? Frankie grabbed Clara's arm, pulling her from the car. Could be a tracker on her. Could be feeding information right now. Then search her and take her phone. Mateo started toward the house, then paused. And Frankie? She doesn't get hurt. Not until I decide what she is. Clara stumbled as Frankie dragged her up marble steps and through doors that probably cost more than her entire life. The inside was all dark wood and expensive art, beautiful and cold, like a museum. A woman in a black suit appeared, hard-faced, professional. She patted Clara down efficiently, removing her phone, her keys, even the pen from her apron pocket. She's clean, the woman reported. No weapons, no wires, no tracking devices. That proves nothing, Tommy growled, following them up a grand staircase. Smart ones don't carry devices. They memorize everything. I'm not smart. Clara's voice cracked with hysteria. I barely graduated high school. I serve eggs and coffee. I don't even know what you people do. We're businessmen, Mateo said from behind them, his footsteps soft on the carpet. Businessmen don't kill people in parking lots. Depends on the business. They reached the 3rd floor. Frankie opened a door to reveal a room that looked like a luxury hotel suite. King bed, private bathroom, even a small sitting area. It would have been beautiful if it wasn't a prison. Why? Clara turned to face Mateo, desperation overriding fear. Why are you doing this? I saved your life. Maybe Mateo leaned against the doorframe, studying her with those empty eyes. Or maybe you're exactly what my enemies wanted, an innocent-looking girl who'd make me lower my guard. I'm not. My driver Marco had a wife and 2 kids, Mateo continued, voice hard as stone. He was with me for 12 years. Someone gave those assassins access to my car, my schedule, my exact location. Someone betrayed me tonight, and until I know who, everyone's a suspect. He stepped closer, and Clara backed up until she hit the wall. So here's how this works, Mateo said quietly. Tomorrow, you're going to tell me everything about the men who took your brother. Every detail. Every face. Every word. Because either you're lying and working with my enemies, or you're telling the truth and you're the key to finding who's trying to kill me. And if I tell you everything, Clara whispered, then maybe you live long enough to go home. And if you don't believe me, Mateo's expression didn't change. Then you won't. He stepped back into the hallway. Frankie followed, pulling the door shut. Clara heard the lock click, a sound like a coffin closing. She was alone in a golden cage, surrounded by men who killed without hesitation, held captive by a man who saw her as either a tool or a threat. Clara slid down the wall and buried her face in her hands, finally letting herself break. Hours ago, her biggest worry was whether she'd make enough tips to cover rent. Now she didn't know if she'd live to see tomorrow. Clara didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching dawn break through the barred windows, painting the luxury prison in shades of gold that felt like mockery. Every sound made her jump. Footsteps in the hall, doors closing somewhere below, the distant murmur of voices. At 7 a.m., the lock clicked. Frankie entered carrying a tray, coffee, eggs, toast. He set it on the desk without a word, his face unreadable. "Am I going to die today?" Clara asked, her voice hoarse from crying. Frankie paused at the door. "That depends on what you tell the boss. I've already told him everything." "Then you better remember more." He left, locking her in again. Clara forced herself to eat, knowing she'd need strength for whatever came next. The eggs tasted like ash. An hour later, 3 men came for her. Tommy led the way, his hostility barely contained. Frankie followed, and behind him was someone new, a thin man in an expensive suit with silver hair and calculating eyes. He looked like an accountant, but the way he studied Clara made her skin crawl. "The boss wants to see you," Tommy said. "Try anything stupid, and I'll put a bullet in your knee." "Understood?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. They led her down to the second floor, through hallways lined with art that probably cost millions, into a study that smelled of leather and old money. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive oak desk, and sitting behind it, Matteo Vitali, looking far more dangerous in the morning light than he had in darkness. He'd changed into a fresh suit, black on black. His face was clean-shaven, his dark hair perfectly styled. He looked like a CEO, not a killer. But Clara knew better now. "Sit." He gestured to a chair facing his desk. Clara sat, feeling like she was facing a judge and executioner combined. The silver-haired man closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. Frankie and Tommy flanked Matteo's desk like statues. Matteo opened a folder and spread photographs across the desk. Crime scene photos, brutal, bloody, horrifying. Clara's stomach turned. "Recognize any of these men?" Matteo asked, his tone businesslike. Clara forced herself to look. Bodies in alleys, in cars, in warehouses. Some shot, some worse. Her hand trembled as she pointed to one photo.
Him.
The one with the scar. That's the man from the parking lot. The one Frankie she couldn't finish. Good. Matteo pulled that photo aside. His name was Vincent Russo, low-level enforcer for the Calabrese family. "Your turn, Tommy." Tommy slapped down a different photo. A restaurant, broken windows, chairs overturned. "This your family's place in Indianapolis." Clara's breath caught. "How did you?" "Answer the question."
Yes.
That's Papa Giovanni's. My father's restaurant." Tears stung her eyes. "That's where they took Antonio. 2 years ago, the Calabrese family was expanding into Indiana," the silver-haired man said, his voice smooth and cold. "They used protection rackets. Pay up or get destroyed. Your father refused. He couldn't afford it. We were barely surviving." Clara's voice broke. "They came 3 times. The 3rd time, they dragged Antonio out by his hair, and..." She stopped, the memory too painful. "And you paid," Matteo finished. $20,000. Your mother's entire retirement savings." Clara's head snapped up. "How do you know that?" "Because I make it my business to know everything." Matteo leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "Here's what bothers me, Clara. The Calabrese family doesn't usually kill when they get paid. They're businessmen like me. Once they get their money, the debt's settled. They didn't keep their word. Or..." Tommy interrupted harshly. "Your brother wasn't kidnapped at all." Maybe he owed them money himself. Gambling debt, drug debt. Maybe he played you, and you're playing us. Antonio was 17. Clara shot back, anger cutting through fear. He worked at the restaurant after school. He didn't gamble, didn't do drugs. Everyone says that about their dead brother. Tommy sneered. We don't know he's dead. Clara stood up, fury overwhelming common sense. We never found a body. The police never found anything. He just disappeared.
Sit
down. Mateo's voice was quiet but absolute. Clara sat, shaking with rage and grief. The silver-haired man spoke again. Miss Brennan, I'm Vincent Castellano, Mr. Vitale's attorney and advisor.
I need you to understand something.
The timing of your appearance is extraordinarily suspicious. You show up in Chicago 8 months ago. You get a job at a diner that Mr. Vitale frequents. Last night, you're conveniently positioned to see assassins and warn him. From where we're sitting, this looks like a very elaborate setup. A setup where I save his life? Clara's voice rose. That doesn't make sense.
Sure it does, Tommy said.
Save the boss, earn his trust, get inside the organization, then feed information to his enemies. Classic infiltration. I don't even know who his enemies are. I don't know anything about any of this. Clara turned to Mateo, desperate.
Please.
Waitress. I live in a studio apartment that smells like mold. I eat ramen 4 nights a week. I'm nobody. I just saw men who hurt my family and I couldn't, her voice cracked. I couldn't let them hurt someone else. That's all. That's the only reason I screamed. Mateo studied her in silence, his expression unreadable. The room felt like it was shrinking. Finally, he spoke. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell Vincent everything you remember about your brother's kidnapping. Every detail, no matter how small. Names, faces, cars, words, everything. Then we're going to verify your story, piece by piece. And then I can go home. And then we'll see if you're a victim or a spy. Mateo stood, buttoning his jacket. If you're lying, Clara, if you're working with the people who killed Marco and tried to kill me, I promise you'll regret ever learning my name. He walked toward the door, then paused. But if you're telling the truth, if you really are just an unlucky waitress who saved my life, he looked back at her, something flickering in those cold eyes. Then you might be the key to destroying my enemies. Either way, you're mine now. Until I know which. The door closed behind him with a sound like a death sentence. Clara sat alone with Vincent Castellano, who pulled out a notepad and pen with the cold efficiency of a man about to dissect her entire life. Let's start from the beginning, he said. The day they took your brother. 3 days passed like years. Clara remained locked in the 3rd-floor room, but her prison had become strangely comfortable. Meals arrived 3 times daily, not prison food, but actual cuisine. Someone left fresh clothes in her size. The bathroom was stocked with expensive toiletries. She even found books on the nightstand, as if someone had tried to make captivity bearable. It was terrifying how quickly luxury could feel normal. Vincent Castellano questioned her for hours each day, taking notes on everything. He was thorough, patient, and completely emotionless, like a surgeon cutting into her memories. Clara told him about Antonio's laugh, his dreams of culinary school, the way he'd looked when Vincent Russo dragged him into a black van. By the 3rd day, she was exhausted and hollowed out. That evening, Frankie appeared at her door with an unusual request. Boss needs you downstairs. Clara's heart hammered.
Why?
Didn't say. Just said to bring you. She followed him down to the 2nd floor, but instead of the study, they stopped at a different door. Frankie knocked once. Come in. Mateo's voice strained. Frankie opened the door and gestured for Clara to enter. She stepped into what looked like a private sitting room. Leather couches, a bar cart, dim lighting. Mateo sat on the couch, his shirt unbuttoned and hanging open. Blood seeped through a bandage wrapped around his ribs. Close the door, Mateo said. Clara heard it click shut behind her. They were alone. You're bleeding, she said, stating the obvious because her brain couldn't process anything else. One of the assassins got me with his knife. Didn't realize how deep until today, Matteo grimaced, pressing his hand against the wound. My usual doctor is out of the city. Vincent tried, but he's useless with medical shit. You need a hospital. I need discretion. Matteo's eyes met hers. Hospitals ask questions. Gunshot wounds, stab wounds, they call police.
Can't have that.
Clara understood. He existed outside the law entirely. Why am I here? Vincent says you told him you were pre-med for a year before your family lost everything. Matteo gestured to a first aid kit on the coffee table, professional grade, the kind paramedics carried. That true? Clara nodded slowly. 1 year at Indiana University before we couldn't afford tuition anymore. Then you know how to stitch. She stared at him. You want me to. The bleeding's getting worse. Vincent already cleaned it and tried to close it, but he did a shit job. Matteo's jaw tightened with pain. So either you help me or I bleed out on this couch. Your choice. Clara's mind raced. This was insane. He'd held her prisoner, threatened her family, treated her like a suspect for 3 days. Now he wanted her to save his life. But looking at the blood spreading across the bandage, she knew he wasn't lying about the severity. Fine, she heard herself say. But I need better light, and you need to lie flat. Matteo moved to the couch, stretching out with a barely suppressed groan. Clara turned on every lamp in the room, then opened the first aid kit. Her hands shook as she pulled on latex gloves. Nervous? Matteo watched her with those unreadable eyes. I'm about to put a needle in a Mafia boss, Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. Yeah, I'm nervous. Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. Fair point. Clara peeled away the blood-soaked bandage. The wound was ugly, a 4-inch gash along his ribs where Vincent's stitches had already torn open. It needed proper surgical care, but she could at least stop the bleeding. This is going to hurt, she warned. I've had worse. She believed him. His torso was a map of scars, bullet wounds, knife marks, something that looked like a burn. This was a man who'd survived things that would kill most people. Clara cleaned the wound with antiseptic. Matteo didn't flinch, but she saw his jaw clench, muscles in his neck tightening. Tell me something, he said through gritted teeth. Why'd you really scream that night? Clara threaded the needle, grateful for something to focus on besides his proximity. I told you. I recognized.
No.
I mean, why'd you care? You could have stayed silent. Let me die. Safer for you. She pressed the needle through skin, beginning the first stitch. Because letting someone die when you can prevent it makes you just as guilty. Philosophical for a waitress. My father was a good man. Clara worked carefully, her hands finding their old rhythm from anatomy labs and volunteer work. He taught us that silence in the face of evil is its own kind of evil, even if it costs you. Cost you plenty, Matteo observed. Ended up here. Better than living with knowing I could have stopped a murder, and didn't. She tied off the first stitch, started the second. What kind of person would that make me?
A smart one.
A safe 1 inch. A dead one. Inside, Clara glanced at his face. Where it counts. Something shifted in Matteo's expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Like he'd just seen her as an actual person instead of a problem to solve. They fell into silence as Clara worked. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, closing the wound stitch by stitch. She was close enough to smell his cologne mixed with blood and antiseptic. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. Close enough to notice he was watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with pain. You're good at this, he said quietly. I wanted to be a doctor. Surgeon. Specifically, Clara's voice was soft with old grief. Guess life had other plans. Life or my enemies. She tied off the final stitch. Both, maybe. Clara bandaged the wound with clean gauze, her hands finally steady. When she looked up, she found Matteo still watching her, not with suspicion anymore, but something else. Something that made her breath catch. Thank you, he said, and it sounded like the words were foreign to him. You're welcome. Clara peeled off the gloves, suddenly aware of how vulnerable they both were. Him shirtless and wounded. Her close enough to touch, close enough to hurt, close enough to... She stood abruptly. You should rest. No heavy lifting for at least a week. Mateo sat up slowly, wincing. You giving me doctor's orders? Someone has to. Clara moved toward the door, needing distance. You're not invincible, Mr. Vitali. That wound could have killed you. Mateo, he said. She turned back. What? Call me Mateo. Mr. Vitali was my father. He buttoned his shirt over the fresh bandages, his eyes never leaving hers. And Clara? Vincent confirmed your story. The dates, the locations, everything. You're telling the truth about your brother. Clara's heart stopped.
So,
I can go home? Mateo's expression darkened.
no.
Because now that I know you're not working with my enemies, I know something else. What? The men who took your brother are the same ones trying to kill me. Which means you're not just a witness anymore. He stood, moving closer despite the pain it must have caused. You're bait. And they'll come for you eventually. Then let me run. They'll find you. Mateo stopped inches away, and Clara realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She should be, but she wasn't. The only place you're safe is here. With me. That's not safety. That's a different kind of cage. Maybe his voice dropped lower. But at least in this cage, you're alive. They stood there, the air between them electric with tension neither could name. Captor and captive. Killer and healer. Two people who shouldn't care about each other, but somehow did. Go back to your room, Mateo finally said. But tomorrow, things change.
How?
You wanted to find your brother. I want to find who's trying to kill me. Tomorrow, we start looking for answers together. Clara woke the next morning to shouting. Angry voices echoed through the mansion. Mateo's, raised louder than she'd ever heard it, and others responding in equally heated tones. She pressed her ear to the door, trying to make out words, but could only catch fragments. Compromise the entire operation. Should never have brought her here. Your call, boss, but this is on you. The lock clicked. Clara jumped back as the door swung open. Frankie stood there, his face grim.
Get dressed.
Something's happened. 10 minutes later, Clara stood in Mateo's study surrounded by angry men. Mateo sat behind his desk, his face carved from stone. Tommy paced like a caged animal. Vincent stood by the window, looking out at the grounds with unusual tension. For other men she didn't recognize lined the walls, all armed, all furious. On Mateo's desk sat a manila envelope. Tell her, Tommy snarled at Mateo. Tell her what her little rescue mission cost us. Mateo's eyes were cold as he looked at Clara. Word got out that I survived the hit. My enemies know someone warned me. They've identified you. Clara's blood turned to ice. How? Diner has security cameras, Vincent said quietly. Someone hacked the footage. You're visible running into the parking lot, screaming. They know exactly who you are. And they know you're here, Tommy added viciously. Which means they know the boss is protecting you. Which makes us all look weak. Tommy, Mateo's voice cracked like a whip. Enough. But Tommy wouldn't stop. She's brought this entire organization under scrutiny. The Calabrese family knows we have her. The Russians are asking questions. Even our own allies are wondering why you're harboring some random waitress. I said enough. Mateo stood, and the room fell silent. He picked up the manila envelope with careful control. This arrived an hour ago. Delivered to our front gate by a kid on a bike who got paid $50, and I can't describe who hired him. He opened the envelope and pulled out a single photograph. Clara's mother, Susan Brennan, walking out of her house in Indianapolis, carrying groceries. A red circle had been drawn around her head. Clara's knees went weak.
No.
No, please. Mateo laid out more photos. Her sister Emma, leaving class at Indiana State. Also circled. Clara's tiny apartment in Chicago, the door marked with a red X. There's a note, Mateo said flatly and read. Hand over the girl by midnight tomorrow, or everyone she loves dies. After we're done with them, we'll burn down every business you own, kill every soldier you have, and hang you from the Chicago River Bridge. You should have died in that parking lot, Vitali. Now you'll watch your empire crumble first. C. C for Calabrese, Vincent said. This is Carlo Calabrese himself, the family head. They're declaring war, one of the armed men said. Over a goddamn waitress. No, Matteo's jaw was tight. They're declaring war because I survived their assassination attempt. Clara's just an excuse. Then give her to them. Tommy exploded. Cut our losses. We can't go to war over some girl. She saved my life. Matteo's voice was dangerously quiet. And now she's going to cost us everything. Tommy slammed his fist on the desk. Be smart, boss. One life for dozens of hours. For the whole organization. It's basic math. Clara felt the room closing in. Everyone was looking at her like she was a bomb about to explode. Maybe she was. If you give me to them, she heard herself say, voice shaking, will they leave my family alone? No, Vincent answered before Matteo could. They'll kill you and your family anyway. That's how they operate. The threat isn't negotiable, it's inevitable. Clara's legs finally gave out. She sank into a chair, the full horror of what she'd done crashing over her. I killed them. By screaming, by warning you, I killed my own mother and sister. You didn't kill anyone, Matteo said, his tone softer. They did. The moment they decided to come after me. Touching, Tommy sneered. But it doesn't solve our problem. We have until midnight tomorrow to decide. Give her up and look weak, or keep her and go to war. There's a third option, Frankie spoke up. We move her family. Get them somewhere safe, then fortify here. They'll find them eventually, Vincent countered. The Calabrese family has resources, connections. Hiding civilians long-term is nearly impossible. Then what do we do? One of the other men asked. Everyone looked at Matteo. He stood silent, staring at the photographs of Clara's family. His hand unconsciously moved to his ribs, where fresh stitches held him together, stitches Clara had sewn while he was at his most vulnerable. Boss. Tommy pressed. We need a decision. Matteo's eyes met Clara's across the desk. In that moment, she saw something that shocked her. Guilt. This man who killed without hesitation, who ruled through fear and violence, felt guilty about what his world had done to hers. Get her family, Matteo said finally. Now. Send our best team to Indianapolis, Frankie. Take Marcus and Leo. Extract the mother and sister. Tell them there's been a credible threat. Don't give them details. Bring them here. Boss, that's... Tommy started. Not. Negotiable, Matteo's voice was steel. Then I want every property we own locked down. Double the guards. Recall everyone from non-essential operations. If Calabrese wants war, we'll give him war. Over her? Tommy gestured at Clara with disgust. Over the principal, Matteo corrected coldly. I don't negotiate with people who threaten me. I don't hand over people under my protection. And I sure as hell don't let anyone tell me how to run my organization. He leaned forward, eyes blazing. Carlo Calabrese tried to kill me and failed. Now he's trying to use fear to manipulate me. If I give in, every two-bit crew in Chicago will think I'm weak. So no, we're not handing her over. Then we're going to war over a liability, Tommy said bitterly. We're going to war because I choose to. Matteo's voice dropped to something lethal. And anyone who doesn't like that decision can walk out right now. But if you stay, you follow orders. Understood? Silence. Then one by one the men nodded. Good. Get moving. Frankie, you have 4 hours to get to Indianapolis and back. Vincent, call our legal contacts. I want every legitimate business protected. Tommy, coordinate the security lockdown. Matteo rattled off orders with practiced efficiency, transforming from conflicted to commander in seconds. The room emptied until only Clara and Matteo remained. You should have given me to them, Clara whispered. My life isn't worth a war. That's not your decision to make. Matteo walked around the desk, standing over her. You saved my life when you had every reason not to. You stitched me up when you could have let me bleed. You're not a liability, Clara. You're my responsibility now. I don't want to be your responsibility. Too late, his voice gentled. Your mother and sister will be here by evening. They'll be safe. And tomorrow, when Calabrese comes for you, he'll find an army instead of a victim. Clara looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd turned her life upside down, who'd chosen war over the easy path, who looked at her like she was worth protecting. Why? She asked. Why risk everything? Matteo was quiet for a long moment. Because the men who took your brother are the same ones who tried to kill me. Because you showed courage when it mattered. And because he stopped, something flickering in his expression. Because I'm tired of being the man who only survives. Maybe it's time to be the man who saves someone. He turned and walked toward the door, then paused. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be hell. Clara's mother and sister arrived at sunset, escorted by Frankie and his team. Clara ran down the grand staircase as her mother stumbled through the front doors, eyes wide with terror and confusion. Emma clung to Susan's arm, both women looking like they'd been thrown into a nightmare. Mom. Clara threw her arms around Susan, holding her tight. Clara, what's happening? Susan's voice shook. These men came to the house with guns, saying we were in danger, saying you. She pulled back, gripping Clara's shoulders. What have you gotten into? I'll explain everything. I promise. You're safe now. Safe. Emma's voice was shrill. They grabbed us from our house. They wouldn't tell us anything. Clara, are you in trouble with? She looked around at the armed men, the mansion, finally settling on Matteo watching from the study doorway. Oh my God. Is that a mob boss? Emma, please. Girls, Susan's voice was firm despite her fear. She looked directly at Matteo. I don't know who you are or what my daughter is involved in, but we're not criminals. We're just collateral damage, Matteo said, stepping forward. His voice was respectful, almost gentle. Mrs. Brennan, your daughter saved my life 4 nights ago. Unfortunately, the people who tried to kill me have decided to use your family to get to her. Susan's face went pale. Saved your life? Clara, what? I'll explain, Clara said quickly. But first, let's get you both settled. Please, Mom. Trust me. An hour later, Clara sat with her mother and sister in a secure guest suite on the 2nd floor. She told them everything. The parking lot, the assassins, the kidnapping, Matteo's protection. Emma looked terrified. Susan looked heartbroken. This is because of Antonio, Susan said quietly. Isn't it? Those same men. Clara nodded. I recognized one of them, Mom.
Vicente Russo.
The one with the scar. Susan closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. We should have left Indianapolis after they took him. Should have run far away. But I kept hoping, her voice broke. I kept hoping he'd come home. Mrs. Brennan? Vincent Castellano appeared at the door, his expression unusually sympathetic. Mr. Vitali would like to speak with Clara. It's about her brother. Clara found Matteo in his study, documents spread across his desk. He'd pulled up files, photographs, financial records, 2 years of investigation into the Calabrese family. Sit, he said. I need you to tell me everything about the kidnapping again. Every detail, especially about the ransom. Clara sank into the chair.
Why?
Vincent already. Because I think I missed something. Matteo's eyes were intense. The ransom. You said your family paid $20,000. Who delivered it? My father. They gave him an address, an abandoned warehouse on the east side of Indianapolis. He went alone, left the money in a duffel bag like they instructed. And then? Nothing.
3 days went by. No Antonio.
No phone call. My father went to the police, but they said it was probably a runaway situation. That teenage boys disappear all the time. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. We kept calling, kept searching. My father drove to that warehouse every day for a month, hoping for a clue. It destroyed him. 6 months later, he had a heart attack. The doctors said it was stress. Matteo pulled out a photograph, a warehouse, abandoned and graffitied. This one. Clara's breath caught.
Yes.
How did you? Because I know that warehouse. Mateo's jaw tightened. It's owned by a shell company. I've been tracking it for 2 years, trying to figure out who controls it. The trail went cold every time. What does that mean? It means your brother's kidnapping wasn't random. Mateo spread out more documents. Carlo Calabrese doesn't do small-time extortion in Indiana. He's Chicago-based, high-level operations. Protection rackets, gambling, money laundering. He wouldn't waste time squeezing 20 grand from a failing restaurant. Then why? Unless it wasn't about the money, Mateo pulled out another file. 2 years ago, Carlo Calabrese was making a move to consolidate power. He was eliminating rivals, absorbing smaller operations, building an empire. But he needed leverage against someone. Clara's stomach twisted. Leverage? Your father's restaurant. Who supplied your meat and produce? The question seemed random. A distributor called Marino Foods. They were local, family-owned.
Why?
Mateo's expression darkened. Because Marino Foods was a front company for the Genovese crew. A smaller family that controlled parts of Indiana. They were rivals to Calabrese, and he wanted them gone. Clara's mind raced, trying to connect the dots. I don't understand. What does that have to do with Antonio? Everything. Mateo leaned forward. Think about it, Clara. A 17-year-old kid who works at a restaurant supplied by a rival organization. A kid who might have seen things, deliveries, faces, money changing hands. Things that could be used as evidence. Antonio never said anything about seeing. He might not have known what he was seeing. Mateo's voice was urgent now. But Calabrese would have known. He takes your brother, demands ransom from your father. Your father pays, and then Antonio disappears. No body ever found. Clara felt sick. You think Calabrese took Antonio because of what he might have witnessed. I think Calabrese took Antonio to use against the Genovese family. Maybe as proof he could touch their operations. Maybe as a hostage to force cooperation. Maybe as a message. Mateo's fists clenched. 6 months after your brother disappeared, the Genovese crew fell apart. Their leadership was arrested on federal charges, racketeering, murder, fraud. Someone had turned state's evidence. You think Antonio. I think your brother might have been forced to testify. Or maybe he saw something so damaging that Calabrese used it to destroy his enemies. Mateo met her eyes. Either way, he wasn't killed for ransom money. He was taken because he was a pawn in a war you didn't even know was happening. Clara's world tilted. All these years, she thought Antonio died because their father couldn't pay enough, couldn't do enough. But if Mateo was right, if Antonio testified, if he gave evidence, where would he be now? Witness protection, maybe. Or dead because he became a liability. Mateo's voice gentled. I don't know, Clara. But what I do know is that Carlo Calabrese has a pattern. He uses civilians as leverage, then discards them. He did it to your family. He's trying to do it to you. And he's been doing it for years. How many people? Clara whispered. More than I can count. Mateo stood, moving to the window. I've been trying to build a case against him for 3 years. Every time I get close, evidence disappears. Witnesses vanish. The man's untouchable because he's smart. He uses people's families against them, forces cooperation through fear. He turned back to her. But you're different, Clara. You're not afraid of him. You're angry. You want answers about your brother. And you just might be the key to bringing him down.
How?
Because you recognize Vincent Russo. Because you can identify faces, locations, details that might connect to other victims. Mateo's eyes blazed with something Clara hadn't seen before. Hope. You're not just a liability. You're a witness. And if we can find others like you, people who've survived Calabrese's operations, we might finally have enough to destroy him. Clara stood, her legs shaky, but her resolve hardening. If there's a chance Antonio's alive, then we find him, Mateo promised. Together. But first, we survive tomorrow. When Calabrese comes for you, we show him he picked the wrong family to terrorize. For the first time since that night in the parking lot, Clara felt something besides fear. She felt purpose. The attack came at 3 a.m., hours before Calabrese's midnight deadline. Clara was awake, sitting in the third-floor window seat, watching the estate grounds illuminated by security lights. Sleep was impossible knowing what tomorrow would bring. Her mother and Emma were finally resting in the suite next door, exhausted from crying and questions Clara couldn't answer. She almost missed the movement in the trees. A shadow, barely visible. Then another, moving with purpose toward the mansion's east wing. Clara's heart stopped. She ran to the door, pounding on it. Frankie, Tommy, someone. The door flew open. Tommy stood there, gun already drawn. What? There are men outside. In the trees. Coming toward the house. Tommy's expression hardened. He grabbed his radio. Possible breach. East perimeter. All units. The window behind Clara exploded. Glass shattered inward as a grappling hook crashed through, embedding in the wall. Tommy shoved Clara down as gunfire erupted from outside. Bullets tore through the room, splintering wood and shredding furniture. Stay down. Tommy returned fire through the broken window, his shots precise and controlled. Alarms screamed throughout the mansion. Shouts echoed from below. Mateo's men mobilizing, but the attackers had timed this perfectly. They'd studied the estate, found the weaknesses, and struck where they knew Clara would be. A figure swung through the broken window, masked, armed, moving with military precision. Tommy turned to engage, but a second attacker came through behind the first. They flanked him, professional and ruthless. Clara scrambled backward as the fight erupted. Tommy took down one attacker with a brutal close-quarters shot, but the second slammed into him, and they crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs and violence. More grappling hooks hit the mansion. They weren't just coming for Clara, they were mounting a full assault. Clara ran for the door, but a third attacker appeared in the hallway, cutting off her escape. He was massive, 6'4" of muscle and menace, a black mask covering his face. Target acquired, he said into his radio. Third floor, east wing. Clara backed into the room as he advanced. Behind her, Tommy was still fighting, but losing. The other attacker had him pinned, choking him with a strap from his own rifle. The massive man grabbed Clara's arm with crushing force. Carlos, send his regards, bitch. Panic flooded Clara's system. She was going to die. Her family was going to die. Everything Mateo had promised was falling apart.
No.
Something in Clara snapped. She'd spent 2 years being a victim. Spent 4 days being a prisoner. Spent her entire life watching bad men take what they wanted. Not anymore. Clara's free hand shot out, grabbing a heavy crystal lamp from a side table. She swung it with every ounce of strength she had, smashing it against the man's masked head. The lamp shattered, crystal and blood flying. The man stumbled, his grip loosening. Clara swung again, this time with the lamp's base, catching him in the temple. He dropped like a stone. Behind her, Tommy was still trapped, his face turning purple. His attacker didn't see Clara coming until she brought the lamp base down on his skull.
Once. Twice.
The man released Tommy and slumped sideways. Tommy gasped for air, clutching his throat.
Jesus.
The door exploded inward. Mateo burst through with Frankie and 3 other guards, guns raised. He took in the scene instantly. 2 attackers down, Tommy barely conscious, Clara standing over them with a bloodied lamp, shaking but alive. Clear the floor, Mateo barked. Frankie, get Mrs. Brennan and Emma to the safe room.
Now.
More gunfire erupted from below. The mansion had become a war zone. Mateo grabbed Clara's shoulders. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. She saved my life. Tommy croaked from the floor. Hit them with the lamp. Both of them. Mateo's eyes widened, something like shock crossing his face. Then respect. Can you walk? Yes. Then stay close to me. He kept one hand on her arm as they moved into the hallway. Bodies littered the corridor, some Mateo's men, more attackers. The assault was coordinated and brutal. They reached the main staircase, just as a group of masked gunmen rushed up from the first floor. Matteo fired with cold precision, each shot finding its mark. Frankie covered the left flank. Clara pressed against the wall, her heart thundering, the lamp still gripped in her bloody hands. "South entrance is breached," someone shouted over the radio. "They're trying to flank." An explosion rocked the mansion. The lights flickered and died, emergency generators kicking in seconds later with dim, red lighting. "They're trying to cut the power completely," Vincent's voice crackled through Matteo's radio. "Get to the safe room. They're going to storm the building." But Matteo wasn't retreating. Clara saw it in his eyes, the calculation, the fury. He'd been backed into a corner, and cornered predators were the most dangerous. "How many?" Matteo demanded into the radio. 12 confirmed. Maybe more outside. Positions? 4 down. 8 active, scattered across first and second floors. Matteo's jaw tightened. He looked at Clara, then at his men. "Frankie, take Clara to the safe room with her family. Vincent, coordinate defense from the control room. Everyone else, with me. We end this now." "Boss, they outnumber us," one guard started. "I don't care." Matteo's voice was ice and steel. "They came into MY house. Tried to take someone under MY protection. They don't leave here breathing." He started down the stairs, and his men followed without hesitation, loyal to the end. Clara grabbed his arm. "Wait. Let me help." Matteo turned, and for a moment she saw past the ruthless boss to the man underneath. "You've already helped enough. That lamp." A ghost of a smile. "That was impressive. But this is my world now. Let me handle it. Those men want me. If I hide, your people die protecting me. That's their job." Matteo's hand covered hers briefly. "And mine is keeping you alive. Whatever I have to do." Another explosion, closer this time. Windows shattered somewhere below. "Go," Matteo said firmly. "Frankie will protect you. And Clara?" He paused at the top of the stairs. "Thank you. For Tommy. For choosing to fight." Then he disappeared into the chaos, and Clara realized with startling clarity that she wasn't afraid for herself anymore. She was afraid for him. Frankie pulled her toward the safe room, but Clara looked back one last time. Through the smoke and gunfire, she saw Matteo moving like a force of nature, precise, lethal, unstoppable. And she understood why his enemies feared him. Dawn broke over the Vitali estate, painting the destruction in shades of gold and blood. Clara stood in the safe room's doorway, looking at the aftermath. Bullet holes scarred the walls. Broken glass covered marble floors. Furniture was overturned and shattered. 3 of Matteo's guards were dead. 5 more wounded. But all 12 attackers were gone. Some dead, others captured and taken to the basement for questioning. Matteo had won. Barely. She found him in his study, standing at the window with his back to the door. His shirt was torn and bloodied, some his, most not. His knuckles were split and raw. He held a glass of whiskey but hadn't drunk from it. "You should be resting," Clara said quietly. "So should you." He didn't turn around. "Your mother and sister?" Terrified but unhealthy. Frankie put them in a reinforced suite with 2 guards. Clara stepped further into the room.
"Matteo, I'm sorry."
"This is my fault. If I hadn't." "Don't." He finally turned, and Clara saw exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "Calabrese chose this.
"Not you."
He attacked my home, killed my men. This is war now, and wars have casualties. 3 men died protecting me. 3 men died protecting what's mine. There's a difference." Matteo set down the untouched whiskey. Vincent interrogated one of the survivors. "They weren't supposed to kill you, just grab you and get out. Calabrese wants you alive." Clara's blood chilled.
"Why?"
"Because you're a symbol now. The waitress who defied him. If he parades you in front of the other families, shows them I couldn't protect you, it destroys my reputation." Matteo's voice was bitter. "In my world, perception is everything. Power is nothing without fear and respect." "Then give me to him." Clara heard herself say it again. even though she knew it was pointless. End this before more people die.
No.
Mateo. I said no. He moved closer, his eyes blazing. You know what I realized during that fight? When I saw you standing over those attackers with that lamp, covered in blood, still breathing? He stopped just inches from her. You're not a liability. You're a fighter. And fighters are valuable. Clara's breath caught at his proximity. What are you saying? I'm saying we stop pretending you're just an innocent waitress I'm protecting out of obligation. Mateo's voice dropped lower. You want to find your brother. I want to destroy Carlo Calabrese. Our goals align. An alliance. A partnership. Mateo held out his hand. You give me everything you know, every detail, every face, every memory that might help me build a case against Calabrese. In return, I use my resources, my connections, my entire organization to find out what happened to Antonio. Clara stared at his outstretched hand. This was insane. Partnering with a mafia boss to investigate her brother's disappearance meant diving deeper into a world she'd spent her life avoiding. But that world had already swallowed her whole. She took his hand.
Deal.
Mateo's grip was firm, warm. Then we start now. Vincent has files on every known Calabrese operation from the past 5 years. We go through everything, look for patterns, connections to your brother's case. What if we don't find anything? Then we make him tell us. Mateo's smile was dangerous. One of those attackers in my basement used to work directly for Carlo. By tonight, he'll tell us everything he knows. Clara should have been horrified by the implication. Instead, she felt a dark satisfaction. They spent the next 4 hours buried in files. Vincent joined them, bringing boxes of documents, surveillance photos, financial records. Clara's eyes burned from reading, but she pushed through, searching for anything familiar. Wait, she pulled out a photograph, a restaurant in Indianapolis, not her family's place. I know this building. It's 2 blocks from Papa Giovanni's. They opened right after we closed. Vincent checked his notes. Russo's Bistro. Opened 18 months ago by Vincent Russo's cousin, Anthony Russo. It's a legitimate business on paper, but we suspect it's a money laundering front. They replaced us, Clara said bitterly. Drove us out of business and took our location's customer base. Not just you. Mateo spread out more photos. 7 family restaurants in Indianapolis closed in the same 6-month period, all replaced by Calabrese-connected establishments. It's a pattern. Squeeze out the independents, move in their own operations. Clara's mind raced. Antonio worked every shift he could. He was always trying to help with bills. What if? She looked up sharply. What if he saw something at one of those other restaurants? Maybe he made deliveries, or helped a friend whose family was also being targeted. That would make him a witness to multiple extortion cases. Vincent's eyes gleamed. That's leverage. Real leverage. Mateo grabbed his phone. Vincent, pull records on every restaurant that closed in that time frame. Employee lists, delivery schedules, everything. Cross-reference with Antonio Brennan's name. As Vincent worked, Mateo turned to Clara. Tell me about Antonio's friends. Anyone he was close to? Anyone who might have known what he was involved in? Clara thought back. His best friend was Marcus Chen. His family owned a Chinese restaurant, Golden Dragon, I think. They closed around the same time we did. Marcus was devastated. Where is Marcus now? I don't know. We lost touch after. Clara's throat tightened. After Antonio disappeared, I couldn't face his friends. Couldn't face anyone. We find Marcus Chen. Mateo made a note. If he and Antonio were close, he might know something. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening, pieces slowly clicking together. Clara felt something shifting between them, the suspicion fading, replaced by mutual respect. Mateo listened to her insights without dismissing them. She watched him work with fierce intelligence, seeing past the killer to the strategist underneath. Around 8 p.m., Vincent burst back into the study. Found something. Antonio Brennan made 3 deposits into his family's restaurant account in the month before he disappeared. $500 each time. $1,500 total. Clara's heart stopped. That's impossible. He didn't have that kind of money. He made minimum wage. Exactly, Vincent's expression was grim. So, where did it come from? Mateo and Clara exchanged looks. Someone paid him, Clara whispered.
To do something.
Or keep quiet about something. Or testify about something, Mateo added. The FBI pays informants.
So, do rival families.
So, do people trying to build cases against their enemies? Clara's hands shook. Antonio was 17. He wouldn't. He would if it meant saving his family's restaurant. Mateo's voice was gentle. Scared kids do desperate things, Clara. Trust me, I know. For a moment, vulnerability flickered across his face. Clara saw the boy he must have been. Young, scared, forced into a brutal world too early. We'll find the truth, she said, and realized she believed it. Mateo nodded. Together. It wasn't friendship, not yet. But standing there surrounded by evidence and shared purpose, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. 3 days of searching yielded a breakthrough, and complications nobody expected. Vincent tracked down Marcus Chun in Gary, Indiana, working at his uncle's restaurant. When Mateo and Clara arrived to question him, Marcus took one look at Clara and broke down crying. I tried to stop him, Marcus sobbed in a back office while his uncle served customers. I told Antonio it was too dangerous, but he wouldn't listen. He said it was the only way to save your family. Clara's hands gripped the table. Stop him from what, Marcus? From working with that FBI agent. The one who kept showing up, asking questions about the Calabrese deliveries. Marcus wiped his eyes. Antonio saw things, Clara. At my family's restaurant, at yours, at others. He saw men counting money in back rooms. Saw packages that weren't food being delivered. He figured out what was happening, that all our families were being used for money laundering. Mateo leaned forward. He went to the FBI. The FBI came to him. Some agent named Harper. She said they were building a RICO case against organized crime in Indiana, and Antonio's testimony could help. Marcus's voice dropped. Antonio thought if he cooperated, if he gave them evidence, the FBI would protect your family. Would make the Calabrese people leave you alone. Clara felt like she'd been punched. So, he testified. He was going to. Agent Harper said she'd put him in witness protection after the grand jury testimony. But then, Marcus's voice broke. Then, he disappeared. 2 days before he was supposed to testify, they grabbed him outside our restaurant. I was there, Clara. I saw the van, saw Vincent Russo drag him inside. I called 911, but by the time police came, they were gone. The room spun. Clara gripped Mateo's arm for support, and his hand immediately covered hers, steadying, grounding. Did you tell the FBI? Mateo asked. Yes, but Agent Harper said there was nothing they could do without a body. She said sometimes witnesses get cold feet and run. Marcus looked at Clara with haunted eyes. But Antonio wouldn't run. He was doing this for you, for your family. He loved you so much. The dam inside Clara finally broke. She stood abruptly and walked out of the office, through the restaurant, into the cold February air. Tears streamed down her face, 2 years of guilt and grief pouring out at once. Mateo followed her into the parking lot. Clara. He died because of me. Her voice was raw. Because I needed a hero. Because our family was drowning and I kept crying about it where Antonio could hear. He was 17 years old, and he tried to save us, and they murdered him for it. You didn't know. I should have. Clara spun to face him. I was his older sister. I should have protected him, should have seen he was involved in something dangerous, should have. She choked on a sob. God, Mateo. He must have been so scared. And I wasn't there. Mateo pulled her against his chest, and Clara collapsed into him, her tears soaking his shirt. His arms wrapped around her, strong, protective, surprisingly gentle. Listen to me, he said quietly. Antonio made his choice. A brave choice. A stupid choice maybe, but his own. You can't carry that guilt. How do you know? Clara's voice was muffled against him. Because I've carried it. Mateo's arms tightened. Every person I've lost, every soldier who died following my orders, every civilian caught in crossfire. I used to think I could control everything, protect everyone. But you can't. All you can do is honor them by surviving. Clara pulled back enough to see his face. For the first time, the mask was completely gone. She saw pain there, loneliness, a depth of isolation she recognized because she felt it too. "You're not what I expected," she whispered. "What did you expect?" "A monster." "I am a monster," Mateo said. "But monsters have reasons. My father was murdered when I was 19. His own lieutenant betrayed him for a promotion with a rival family. I inherited an empire on the edge of collapse and enemies circling like sharks. I had two choices: become ruthless enough to survive, or die. So you chose survival." "I chose loneliness." His voice was barely audible. "In my world, everyone's either an asset or a threat. You can't trust, can't be vulnerable, can't let anyone close because they'll use it against you. I've been alone for 15 years, Clara. Surrounded by people, but completely alone." Clara's hand moved to his face, her thumb tracing his jaw. "You're not alone right now." The air between them shifted, charged with something dangerous and electric. Mateo's eyes darkened as he looked at her, really looked at her, like he was seeing past the waitress, past the witness, to the woman underneath. "Clara," he said, voice rough. "This, whatever this is, it's a bad idea." "Why?" "Because I destroy everything I touch. Because my world kills innocent people. Because you deserve better than." She kissed him. It was desperate and fierce, two broken people seeking comfort in darkness. Mateo responded instantly, his hand sliding into her hair, deepening the kiss with an intensity that stole her breath. Clara felt alive for the first time in years, terrified and exhilarated and completely unmoored from everything she'd known. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mateo rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things," he murmured. "Everything's already complicated." A slight smile. "Fair point." They drove back to Chicago in charged silence, hands intertwined across the center console. But as they pulled through the estate gates, Clara noticed Frankie and Tommy watching from the entrance, their expressions tight with concern. Inside, the whispers had already started. "Boss is distracted," she heard one guard mutter to another. "Spent 3 days focused on the girl instead of business." "Calabrese is still out there," Tommy said sharply to Frankie in the hallway. "We lost 3 men, and instead of planning retaliation, he's playing detective for her brother." "He's invested," Frankie replied carefully. "He's compromised," Tommy's voice was harsh. "I've worked for him for 8 years. Never seen him like this. That girl's in his head, and it's going to get us all killed." Clara's stomach twisted. She pulled Mateo aside before they reached his study. "Your men think I'm distracting you. They worry too much. Are they right?" Mateo studied her, his expression conflicted.
"Yes."
"But I don't care," he cupped her face. "For 15 years, I've made every decision based on strategy, on power, on survival. For once, I'm making a choice based on something else." "What?" "You," his thumb brushed her cheek. "And before you argue, I know it's reckless. I know it weakens me. But Clara, you make me remember what it feels like to be human. To care about something beyond empire and revenge." Clara's heart ached. "Mateo, I know this can't last. I know eventually reality will crush whatever this is. But until then," he kissed her forehead. "Let me be distracted. Let me be weak. Let me feel something besides empty." She should have been smarter. Should have recognized the danger of falling for a man whose world was built on violence. But standing there in the shadows of his mansion, Clara realized she was already falling. And she didn't want to stop. The discovery came at midnight, when Clara couldn't sleep. She'd left her suite to get water from the kitchen, moving quietly through the darkened mansion. As she passed Mateo's study, she heard voices, low, urgent, angry. "Telling you, the numbers don't add up," Vincent's voice, sharp with accusation. Someone tipped off Calabrese about your schedule that night at the diner. Only 4 people knew you'd be there. My inner circle, Matteo's voice was deadly calm. You, Tommy, Frankie, and Marco.
Marco's dead.
That leaves 3 of us. You think I have a traitor? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. In my inner circle, I think someone's been feeding information to Calabrese for months. The failed shipment in October. The warehouse raid in December. The assassination attempt, Vincent's voice hardened. Too many coincidences, Matteo. Someone close to you wants you dead. Clara pressed against the wall, her heart hammering. A traitor. One of the men she'd been trusting with her life. Pull financial records for everyone, Matteo ordered. Bank accounts, properties, everything. If someone's being paid off, I'll find them. Already did, papers rustled. Found something interesting. 3 offshore accounts linked to shell companies. Payments totaling $500,000 over the past year. Who? Vincent's next words made Clara's blood freeze. Tommy Rossini. Silence. Then, no. Tommy's been with me for 8 years. Saved my life in Detroit. He wouldn't. The evidence is here. Payments coincide exactly with every failed operation. And there's more, Vincent's voice dropped. I traced the shell company ownership. It's registered to the same corporation that owned that warehouse in Indianapolis. The one where Clara's family left the ransom money. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Tommy was involved in Antonio's kidnapping? Matteo's voice was lethal. I think Tommy's been working with Calabrese for years. The kidnapping, the assassination attempt, everything. He's been positioning himself to take over your organization once you're dead. Where is he now? Should be on patrol. East Wing, 2nd shift. Bring him to me. Quietly. And, Vincent. A pause. If he resists, put him down. Clara heard movement. Then the study door opened. She flattened herself into a doorway as Vincent hurried past, radioing for backup. She should have run back to her room. Should have stayed out of it. Instead, she crept closer to the study. Through the cracked door, she saw Matteo standing at his desk, staring at the evidence with betrayal carved into every line of his face. Then she heard it, footsteps behind her.
Fast, purposefull.
Clara turned just as Tommy appeared at the end of the hallway, gun drawn. But he wasn't alone. 3 other guards flanked him, men Clara didn't recognize, their expressions cold and hostile. Well, Tommy's smile was vicious. The little waitress, sneaking around where she doesn't belong. You hear something interesting, Clara? She backed toward the study. Matteo. Tommy fired. The bullet hit the wall inches from Clara's head, and she screamed. Matteo exploded through the study door, weapon raised. He took in the scene instantly, Tommy and his men, Clara trapped between them. Tommy, Matteo's voice was pure ice. Put the gun down. Can't do that, boss. Tommy's smile widened. See, I've got new employers now. Better paying, better future. Carlo Calabrese sends his regards. You set up the assassination. I did. Would have worked too, if this bitch hadn't interfered. Tommy gestured at Clara with his gun. But that's okay. Calabrese wants her alive anyway. And you? You he wants dead. You killed Marco. My driver, my friend. Collateral damage, Tommy shrugged. Nothing personal. Just business. You helped kidnap a 17-year-old kid. Matteo's voice shook with rage. Antonio Brennan. You were there. That. Tommy laughed. That was just practice. Calabrese wanted to test his Indianapolis operations, and some restaurant kid made a convenient target. Shame the FBI got to him first, though. Would have made a good bargaining chip. Clara felt her world tilt. Antonio went to the FBI. And we found out. Tommy's eyes gleamed. Grabbed him before he could testify. Calabrese wanted to kill him, but I convinced him the kid was worth more alive. Leverage against federal witnesses. He's been rotting in a black site for 2 years. He's alive. Clara's voice broke.
For now.
But after tonight, after Matteo's dead, and I take over this organization, Tommy's smile was cruel. He's next. Can't leave loose ends. You won't touch him, Matteo growled. You won't be alive to stop me. Tommy nodded to his men. They raised their weapons. Clara saw it happen in slow motion, 4 guns aimed at Matteo, fingers tightening on triggers. She moved without thinking, throwing herself sideways into Matteo as the gunfire erupted. They hit the ground together, bullets tearing through the space where Matteo had stood. Clara felt searing pain across her shoulder but ignored it, rolling behind a marble column as Matteo returned fire with deadly precision. One of Tommy's men went down, then another. But the third caught Matteo in the side, and Clara saw blood bloom across his shirt. Matteo! She grabbed him as he stumbled. I'm fine, he gritted out, firing again. The third guard dropped. Tommy ducked behind a corner, reloading. Should have stayed loyal, boss. Carlo's going to give me everything. Your territory, your money, your power. You'll have to kill me first. Matteo advanced despite the blood pouring from his side. That's the plan. Tommy swung around the corner, gun raised, but Frankie appeared behind him, his own weapon pressed against Tommy's skull. Drop it, Frankie snarled.
Now.
Tommy froze. Frankie, I can cut you in. You killed Marco. You tried to kill our boss. You're a dead man. Sirens wailed in the distance. More guards thundered down the hallways, Vincent leading them. Tommy's expression twisted into hatred. This isn't over. Calabrese has others inside your organization. You'll never know who to trust. Frankie pulled the trigger. Tommy crumpled, and the hallway fell silent except for Matteo's labored breathing. Clara pressed her hands against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Stay with me. Please stay with me. Clara. Matteo's face was pale, his eyes unfocused. Your brother. He's alive. We'll find him. We will. Together. But first you have to survive. Tears streamed down her face. Don't you dare die on me, Matteo Vitali. His hand found hers, slick with blood. Wasn't planning to. Not when I finally found someone worth living for. Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed in her arms. Medic! Clara screamed. Someone get a doctor now. As guards swarmed around them and Vincent barked orders into his phone, Clara held Matteo's unconscious body and made a silent vow. She would find her brother. She would destroy Carlo Calabrese. And she would make sure Matteo survived to see it. Whatever it took. Matteo survived surgery by sheer stubborn will. The bullet had missed vital organs by millimeters, but he'd lost dangerous amounts of blood. For 3 days, he drifted between consciousness and fever dreams while a private surgeon worked around the clock to save him. Clara never left his bedside. She ignored Vincent's suggestions to rest. Ignored her mother's pleas to eat something. Ignored the guards who whispered that she was wasting her time on a dying man. She sat in that chair, held Matteo's hand, and willed him to live. On the 4th day, his eyes opened. Clara? His voice was hoarse, barely audible. She leaned forward, relief flooding through her. I'm here. You're going to be okay. Tommy?
Dead.
Frankie killed him. Clara squeezed his hand. Vincent's been investigating his connections. Found evidence of 2 other Calabrese informants in your organization. They've been dealt with. Matteo tried to sit up and gasped in pain. Don't, Clara gently pushed him back. The doctor said you need at least 2 weeks of rest. Don't have 2 weeks. Matteo's eyes were fierce despite his weakness. Tommy said Antonio's alive. In a black site. We need to find him before Calabrese moves him, or he stopped, unwilling to finish. I know, Clara's voice was steel.
And we will.
But first you need to heal. Clara. I spent 3 days stitching you back together, Matteo Vitali. I'm not letting you die from stubbornness, she stood, adjusting his fore with practiced efficiency. So rest. Build your strength. And when you can stand without bleeding, we'll go get my brother. Over the next week, Clara became Matteo's constant companion and unofficial nurse. She changed his bandages, monitored his vitals, forced him to eat when he had no appetite. She read reports to him while he recovered, helping Vincent coordinate operations from the bedroom. Slowly, Matteo healed. And as he did, something between them deepened. A connection forged in blood and trust, vulnerability and strength. On the 10th day, Matteo stood without assistance. "I'm ready," he said. Vincent had been working tirelessly, using Tommy's phone records and financial data to trace Calabrese operations. He finally found it, a warehouse complex in Hammond, Indiana, 30 miles from Chicago. Satellite imagery showed heavy security, unusual activity, and temperature signatures indicating an underground facility. "That's where they're keeping high-value detainees," Vincent explained, spreading maps across Matteo's desk. "Antonio's there, I'm certain." Matteo studied the layout. Fortified. 12 guards minimum, maybe more inside.
This isn't a snatch and grab.
This is a war. Then we go to war, Clara said from the doorway. Everyone turned. She stood there in dark jeans and a black jacket, her hair pulled back, her expression determined. "Absolutely not," Matteo said immediately. "This is a combat operation. For my brother. I'm coming. Clara, you could be killed. And he could be dead by the time you get there." Her voice rose. "Matteo, please. I've waited 2 years. I need to be there. I need to see him." Matteo looked at her. This woman who'd saved his life twice, who'd refused to abandon him when he was dying, who'd somehow become the most important person in his world. "You stay behind me at all times," he said finally. "You follow orders. And at the first sign of serious trouble, Frankie pulls you out." "Understood." Clara nodded. "Understood." They moved at 3 a.m., a convoy of 3 vehicles carrying Matteo's best fighters. Frankie drove the lead car with Clara and Matteo. The assault was planned with military precision. Vincent had bribed a security company employee for the warehouse's electronic codes. They'd have a 15-minute window before police response. It had to be enough. They parked a block away and approached on foot. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, dark and threatening. Matteo gave hand signals, and his men fanned out, taking positions. "Cameras disabled," Vincent whispered through the radio. "You're clear." They moved like shadows. Frankie cut the lock on a side entrance, and they slipped inside, a maze of corridors and storage rooms that smelled of rust and fear. The first guard died silently, Matteo's knife finding his throat before he could shout. The second managed a strangled warning before Frankie put him down. Then alarms shrieked. "So much for stealth," Matteo growled. "Go loud. Find the basement level." Gunfire erupted. Matteo's team engaged Calabrese guards with ruthless efficiency, while Clara stayed close to Frankie, her heart hammering. This was real combat, violent, chaotic, nothing like movies. They fought through 2 levels, leaving bodies in their wake. Finally, they found stairs leading down into darkness. "Basement," Frankie said. "Has to be." They descended into a concrete corridor lined with steel doors, cells. Clara's stomach turned. How many people were imprisoned here? "Antonio," she shouted. "Antonio Brennan." "Clara?" A voice, weak but unmistakable. "Clara." She ran toward the sound, Matteo and Frankie flanking her. Third door on the left, padlocked, reinforced. "Stand back." Matteo fired 3 shots, destroying the lock mechanism. Frankie kicked the door open. The cell was tiny, filthy, barely lit. And huddled in the corner, thin and beaten but alive, was Antonio. "Oh my God," Clara rushed forward, dropping to her knees. "Antonio. Antonio, it's me." Her brother looked up with hollow eyes, disbelief written across his gaunt face. "This isn't real. You're not real. They keep showing me things." "I'm real," Clara grabbed his hands, too thin, scarred, shaking. "I'm here. I found you. We're getting you out." Antonio collapsed into her arms, sobbing. 2 years of torture and isolation breaking apart at once. Clara held him, tears streaming down her face, barely believing he was alive. "We need to move," Matteo said gently. "Clara, can he walk?" I think so." She helped Antonio stand. He was so thin, so broken. Rage burned through her grief. Calabrese had done this. Had stolen 2 years of her brother's life. "Can you tell us anything?" Matteo asked Antonio. "About who kept you here. What they wanted." Antonio's eyes focused on Matteo with sudden recognition. You're Matteo Vitali," Tommy Rossini said. He stopped, confused. "He said you'd never find me. That you didn't care about civilians." "Tommy's dead," Matteo said flatly. And he was wrong. They made it halfway back to the stairs before the explosion rocked the building. The ceiling collapsed, separating Clara and Antonio from Matteo and the others. Dust and debris filled the air, and through it, Clara saw a figure approaching, tall, silver-haired, expensive suit covered in dust. Carlo Calabrese stepped out of the smoke like a demon from hell. Well, he said, gun aimed at Clara's head. "Matteo Vitali's little waitress. You've caused me considerable trouble." Behind the rubble, Clara heard Matteo shouting her name. But he couldn't reach her. Not in time. "Let them go," Clara said, stepping in front of her broken brother. "You want someone take me?" Calabrese smiled coldly. "Oh, I intend to. But first," he raised his gun toward Antonio. "I'm eliminating my mistakes." Clara closed her eyes, preparing for the end. Then gunfire erupted, not from Calabrese, but behind him. Calabrese spun toward the gunfire, but Matteo was already through the smoke, blood seeping through his bandages, but his aim perfect. The bullet caught Calabrese in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. His gun clattered to the floor. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Matteo said, advancing with cold fury. Frankie and 3 other guards emerged behind him, weapons trained on Calabrese's men who'd been waiting in the shadows. "This isn't over, Vitali." Calabrese clutched his bleeding shoulder. "It is." Matteo's gun never wavered. "You orchestrated an assassination attempt. Attacked my home. Kidnapped and tortured a 17-year-old kid. Planted traitors in my organization." His voice dropped to something lethal. "You made this personal. Kill me, and the other families will come for you." "Let them try." Matteo glanced at Clara and Antonio, making sure they were safe. "But you? You don't get a quick death. You get federal prison. Witness testimony, RICO charges, every crime documented and proven. You'll die behind bars, forgotten and powerless." Calabrese's face went white. "You're turning me over to the feds." "Agent Harper has been very cooperative." Matteo smiled without warmth. "Turns out she's been wanting to nail you for years. When I offered her Antonio's testimony plus evidence of your black site operations, she was more than willing to make a deal." "You're working with the FBI?" Calabrese spit blood. "You've betrayed everything. I'm doing what I should have done years ago. Ending you." Sirens wailed outside, closer now, purposeful. The FBI had been waiting for Matteo's signal. "Get Antonio out of here," Matteo ordered Frankie. "Clara goes with him."
Now.
Clara helped her brother toward the exit, but she looked back at Matteo one last time. Their eyes met across the rubble and smoke, and something passed between them. Gratitude, affection, something deeper that neither had words for yet. Then she was outside, breathing fresh air, watching FBI agents swarm the warehouse. Agent Harper, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, approached with paramedics. "Antonio Brennan?" she asked gently. Antonio nodded, clinging to Clara. "You're safe now. We've got medical transport ready and a full protective detail. You're going to be okay." Harper turned to Clara. "Your testimony and Mr. Vitali's cooperation have given us everything we need. Carlo Calabrese is finished." An hour later, Clara stood outside the hospital where Antonio was being evaluated. Her mother and Emma had arrived, the reunion tearful and overwhelming. Antonio was malnourished and traumatized, but alive. The doctors said he'd recover, physically at least. The emotional scars would take longer. Clara stepped outside for air and found Mateo waiting by a black SUV, Vincent beside him. Both looked exhausted but alive. "How is he?" Mateo asked. "He'll survive. Thanks to you." Clara moved closer. "The FBI said you made a deal. Testified against Calabrese." Seemed like the right play. Mateo's expression was unreadable. "Calabrese goes to prison, my organization gets immunity for cooperation, and your brother gets witness protection, if he wants it. And us." Clara gestured to the hospital. "My family." Mateo was quiet for a long moment. "My council met an hour ago. Vincent, Frankie, the other captains. They wanted me to cut you loose, pay you off, relocate you somewhere far away, eliminate any connection between your family and my organization." Clara's heart sank. And I told them no." Vincent stepped forward, his expression stern but not unkind. "Miss Brennan, you've become what we call a liability. You know too much about Mr. Vitali's operations. Your family's presence creates vulnerabilities. Traditional wisdom says we should sever all ties." "But," Clara looked at Mateo. "But I'm not traditional." Mateo moved closer, his eyes locked on hers. "You saved my life that night in the parking lot. You saved Tommy during the attack. You refused to abandon me when I was dying. You risked everything to find your brother, and in doing so, helped me destroy my most dangerous enemy." He took her hand, and Clara felt her breath catch. "You're not a liability, Clara. You're an asset. More than that, you're someone I trust in a world where trust is rarer than gold." "Mateo, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you to stay. You, your mother, your sister, Antonio when he's ready. I'll set your family up, legitimate businesses, protection, security. Your mother gets her restaurant back. Emma finishes college. Antonio gets the help he needs." Clara's eyes widened. "You'd do that?" "I'd do more." Mateo's voice softened. "I'd give you a place in my organization if you want it. You're smart, brave, resourceful. You see patterns others miss. You'd be valuable in my world. Your world almost got me killed." "It did." Multiple times, Mateo's smile was slight but genuine. "But you're still here. Still fighting. That means something." Vincent cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, Miss Brennan, I recommended this arrangement. You've proven yourself trustworthy under impossible circumstances. That's rare." Clara looked between them, her mind spinning. A week ago, she'd been a waitress worried about rent. Now she was being offered a place in a Mafia organization, protection for her family, and something she'd never expected, belonging. "What about us?" she asked Mateo quietly. "Whatever this is between us." "That's your choice." Mateo's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "I won't pretend my world is safe or normal. But if you want to try, if you want to see where this goes, I'm willing to risk it." Clara thought about everything she'd lost, her father, 2 years with Antonio, her innocence. But she also thought about what she'd gained, strength, purpose, a man who looked at her like she was the most important person in his dangerous world. "I want my mother far away from any illegal operations," she said finally. "Emma finishes school without knowing details. Antonio gets therapy and time to heal. Done. And I want to learn everything. How your organization works, how to protect myself, how to actually be useful instead of just protected." Mateo's smile widened. "I can arrange that." "Then yes." Clara squeezed his hand. "I'll stay. We'll try this." Mateo pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her as naturally as breathing. "You didn't just save my life that night, Clara. You became part of it. Part of me." She looked up at him, this killer with a conscience, this dangerous man who'd chosen to protect her over power.
"Good.
"Because you're stuck with me now. I can live with that." As the sun rose over Chicago, painting the city in gold, Clara Brennan realized her life would never be normal again. But standing there in Mateo's arms, her brother alive, her family safe, she discovered something unexpected. She didn't want normal anymore. She wanted this, dangerous, complicated, real. She wanted him. And for once in her life, she was exactly where she belonged.